Thank you all so much. And so let me give you an official welcome. Tonight's final session of the 2020 Neustadt Lit Fest will feature the Neustadt Prize Award and Ismail Kadare's acceptance speech. I'm Carrie White. I am your host for the festival, and R.C. Davis-Undiano, Executive Director of World Literature Today and the Neustadt Professor at the University of Oklahoma, will be our moderator for tonight's session. And now I would like to share a welcome from OU President Joe Harroz.
Hello, I'm OU President Joe Harroz. I was honored to be invited to share a few words with you for this year's Neustadt Lit Festival, an annual celebration of literary excellence. Like most things in 2020, this year's festival is a little different. But it's both exciting and reassuring that this virtual format is bringing people together from all over the world in a way that's never been done before. You know better than anyone the power of literature. It unites, inspires, and teaches us. It creates and fosters a culture of community. Our minds and hearts are open to new ideas and different perspectives, values that are especially important today. We're also thrilled that this year marks the 50th anniversary of the Neustadt Prize. For half a century, the award has honored some of the world's most exceptional authors across the literary spectrum, beginning with the first laureate, Giuseppe Ungaretti, in 1970, through our newest recipient, Ismail Kadare. We're incredibly proud that the University of Oklahoma and our award-winning magazine, World Literature Today, are home to this prestigious honor. In many ways, the Neustadt Lit Festival and its celebration of literary voices from across the globe epitomizes our essential purpose at OU, to change lives. We thank the Neustadt family for their outstanding and long-time support for our university, and we thank all of you who are joining us for this year's festival.
And now it is my privilege to turn things over to my friend, R.C.
Good evening, everyone. I am R.C. Davis-Undiano, the Executive Director of the World Literature Organization at the University of Oklahoma. I am so pleased to welcome each and every one of you to the annual ceremony for awarding the Neustadt Prize. The Neustadt International Prize for Literature is an award given every other year and sponsored by the University of Oklahoma and the international literary publication World Literature Today. The prize is considered one of the most prestigious in the world, often compared with the Nobel Prize in Literature. The New York Times has called the prize the American Nobel. Since it was founded in 1970, some 33 of its laureates, candidates, or jurors have also been awarded Nobel Prizes. Like the Nobel, it is awarded to writers for their entire body of literature, not for a single work. Now, around the giving of the prize, WLT creates the Neustadt Lit Fest, a tradition of recognizing literary excellence and bringing the greatest writers in the world to meet with and inspire OU students. Tonight, World Literature Today joins with the Neustadt family to honor the 2020 winner of the prestigious Neustadt International Prize for Literature, Ismail Kadare from Albania. The Neustadt programs recognize literature as a source of cultural understanding for the many nations of the world, and we at WLT are honored to be the stewards of this rich tradition at OU. Now gives me great pleasure to introduce three members of the legendary Neustadt family to talk about the Neustadt Prize tradition at OU. First, Kathy Neustadt. She's the K in the NSK Neustadt Prize for Children's Literature. She lives in Denver and is a freelance field producer for ABC News and works on shows for World News Tonight, Good Morning America, and Nightline. She chairs the Meisel Arts and Culture Board at the Denver Jewish Community Center and is proud to have endowed the annual Neustadt Jam Fest, which every fall in Denver features visiting authors, artists, musicians, and new films. She is a trustee of the Rose Community Foundation in Denver. In 2015, she was honored by the Meisel Center with its Cultural Achievement Award, and that year also received the Regents Alumni Award for her service at OU. Kathy graduated from the University of Denver in Mass Communications and has two grown children, Tess and Josh Hankin. Please give a warm welcome to my good friend, Kathy Neustadt.
Thank you so much, RC. 50 years ago, the editor at the time, Ivar Vask of World Literature Today, he dreamt of a literature prize that would rival the Nobel. But after awarding the first laureate the prize in 1970, he thought that was it. There just wasn't enough funding for the next biennial prize. My grandmother, Doris Neustadt, a lover of literature her whole life, was approached by the university to ask if she and her family would consider helping to save the literary award. My father, Walter, who had received his master's from OU and was then on the Board of Regents, was quoted as saying that he recognized this as a natural opportunity to realize his family's philanthropic ideals by endowing an award that would bring international renown to his beloved university. It later became the Neustadt International Prize for Literature. The prize has indeed brought international renown, not just to the university and the world of literature, but also for our laureates whose lives have been forever changed by this award. Take, for instance, a young Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who said after he won the Neustadt Prize in 1972, quote, "This is one great international prize for highly deserving writers who are not yet well known." And we know how that turned out for him. We'd like to think that maybe we were the springboard to his success. But anyway, my sisters and I in 2003, we founded the NSK Award for Children's Literature. And just yesterday, we announced our 10th winner, New York Times bestseller and Indigenous writer Cynthia Ledick Smith. And here we are tonight. We celebrate our 26th Neustadt Prize for Literature winner, Ismail Kadare. Along with a check for $50,000, Kadare will receive the iconic silver feather. The box that holds the feather is made of a sycamore wood indigenous to Oklahoma. The feather itself is symbolic of the rich Native American Oklahoma heritage and is a symbol of strength and freedom like that of an eagle. And of course, it also represents a writing quill. The silver feather embodies the indomitable spirit of this great story and is still a promise that is fulfilled each time that we are able to honor the highest achievements of world literature. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Next, Nancy Barcelo, the N in the NSK Neustadt Prize for Children's Literature, lives in Watertown, Massachusetts with her husband, Scott. She has two grown children, Sam and Emmy. She was recently the director of the Hospice Volunteer Program for the VNA Care Network and Hospice and worked for 24 years as a volunteer and director of volunteer programs. Since retiring, she has continued to provide education to venues in the Boston area. In 2010, Nancy received the Regents Alumni Award for her service to OU, a lover of books who received a BA in English from Skidmore College and a master's degree in reading from Lesley College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nancy is an active advisor to the NSK Neustadt Prize for Children's Literature. Please give a warm welcome to my good friend, Nancy Barcelo.
Thank you so much, RC. It feels really special to be here tonight in this virtual form. As I join you today from my home in Watertown, Massachusetts, I think of the unexplored territory of this time, and I know that one thing is for certain, that everything is uncertain. But one thing that has remained stable and more important than ever is literature, and for some of us, reading our way out of through the pandemic. During this time, I read Ismail Kadare's The General of the Dead Army, and I was transported to a war and a land and to people that were so powerful for me. And I could go on and on about my experience of reading this book, but I need a book group to do this with. Thanks to this great World Literature Today team. They went with the flow of change for this festival, and that change has offered opportunity for so many of you to be here that may have been impossible were it not for this virtual opportunity. For every other Neustadt Prize event I've attended, there was a whole ritual preparing for this festival, from visiting my mother, Dottie Neustadt, in Dallas, stopping in Ardmore to go to Starbucks and see the places of our childhood, and meeting my sister in Norman and taking great Oklahoma walks, and having meals with the WLT team and sitting in our sweats and pajamas, talking to the jurors and award recipients while having a glass of wine or a cup of tea. This year, we cannot do these things, but we already have connected virtually with the WL team to prepare. And now I feel like I'm truly sitting in the midst of old friends and new friends from near and far. Even though I'm sitting in front of a computer screen, I feel connected to all of you as if we were in the Molly Shee Boren Ballroom, standing on the podium with my sisters, Susan and Kathy. I must confess that I am inspired to be here in this fashion. I'm inspired of technology that can bring us closer together during this very uncertain and somber time. None of us planned for the pandemic that is reorganizing our lives, and yet here we are going forward. I must admit that Zoom sessions have been remarkably good at bringing people together. I know there are people from around the world here, and even friends of mine in Massachusetts that would otherwise could not be part of this amazing event. I can see now that the challenge of COVID-19, as sobering as it is also making us better in some ways. It is making us live and breathe 21st century technology much sooner than we would otherwise. I am now taking more classes than ever, with an upside being that I am not in my car all the time. So many opportunities are opened up to participate remotely that would have been impossible otherwise. I can also see that this year, the Neustadt program at OU, after this year, the Neustadt program at OU will never be the same. Now that RC and the other organizers have learned to do an online conference, I think that they will not want to go back even when an in-person conference is safe again. I foresee that the next Neustadt Literary Festival will be a hybrid experience with hundreds of people attending sessions on the OU campus, while thousands of people attend those sessions online as part of the simultaneous virtual Lit Fest. The pandemic forced these innovations, but they are changes that would have happened anyway, just not so soon. My grandmother, Doris Neustadt, helped to create the Neustadt Prize, and my dad, Walter Neustadt Jr., helped to build it to what it is today. I think they would both be smiling if they could see us here tonight. Maybe there is even a Zoom format where they are and they don't even need a computer. But seriously, our dad would have, and my mom will be, so proud to know the flexibility that was involved in organizing this event, and so proud of the Neustadt students who are so dear to our family. I repeat, so proud of the Neustadt students who are so dear to our family. My sisters and I wish we had the opportunity to know each one of you personally. I believe that our mother, Dottie Neustadt, is watching this on her computer in Dallas. So she is here in heart and soul. Hi, Mom. My dad and my grandmother and all the Neustadts would see that what they began 50 years ago is truly important in the world and has achieved a kind of resiliency in the extreme so that it can reinvent itself as needed to survive whatever comes along. I don't think that in their wildest dreams they ever imagined that this program could survive a challenge such as this. I see them smiling and nodding as we go about and advance the work that they started so long ago. Congratulations to those who have created the power of the Neustadt Prize program, and bravo, World Literature Today and OU, as you always find new ways to achieve excellence and continue to grow the OU experience. Thank you, President Harroz and Interim Provost Irvine, for helping to create this atmosphere of ingenuity at OU. WLT and OU are becoming newly exciting in so many different and wonderful ways. As a member of the Neustadt family, I can tell you tonight that we love deeply being your partner in this dynamic and important undertaking. I'm so pleased that the Neustadt program at World Literature Today has become the virtual embodiment of innovation and excellence at OU, just what we always wanted it to be. Thank you so much.
Nancy, thank you. Thank you. Finally, Susan Neustadt Schwartz, the S in the NSK Neustadt name, is an invaluable advisor on all Neustadt programs and WLT matters. She lives in Dallas, Texas, and has two grown daughters, Elizabeth and Kate, an avid equestrian and competitor in hunter jumper events, as well as ballroom dance competitions. She was co-founder and board member of eQuest, a therapeutic horseback riding program for the disabled that was one of the largest and best such programs in the US. She received a BFA in art history from the University of Oklahoma and a master's in education from Southern Methodist University. She is also a board member of the Shelton School in Dallas and won a National Volunteer Award in 2005. In 2010, she received the OU Regents Alumni Award for her service to OU and was most recently honored with the 2017 Audrey Kaplan Inspiring Women Award from the Southwest Jewish Congress. Please give a warm welcome to my good friend, Susan Schwartz.
Thank you, RC. I'm last but not least. So it's so nice to be with all of you tonight. When my dad would come to the banquet, he would look so forward to getting up to say thank you to the Neustadt Prize jurors. And tonight, I get that honor. It is a bit sad for my sisters and me that this was to be the first year of having our NSK Neustadt jurors on campus in Norman. They would have, for the first time, been sharing their readings in the union, signing books in person, and deliberating together face to face to pick the new NSK winner. The best laid plans. We would also be probably sitting in our pajamas tonight visiting with them as well. But modern technology pulled through, and thanks to the hard work of the WLT staff, the University of Oklahoma Wizards of Technology, and the time and care given by our panelists, we were able to hear from all of them virtually as they read their own works. And we know how hard and diligently they worked to pick our new NSK winner. Children's literature and young adult literature continue to rise in popularity and are more respected and needed every day. I'd like to think that our prize has contributed to the development in some small way. I take special pleasure tonight in thanking the jurors for the 2021 NSK Neustadt Prize for Children's Literature. All 9 of those jurors disrupted their own work and lives to choose the NSK winner for 2021. Thank you, Jonathan Oxier, Monica Brown, Tanita S. Davis, Adib Koram, Sonia Patel, Randy Rebai, Cynthia Weil, and Tanea Winder, and Janet Wong. You drew on your expertise to read the works of new writers, to confer with each other, and to deliberate for hours until you had chosen a new NSK winner for 2021. We all thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Susan. Okay, now we're going to hear an appreciation of Ismail Kadare's work from the juror who nominated him for the Neustadt Prize. Kapka Kassabova is a writer of narrative nonfiction, poetry, and fiction. Her work explores the interplay of places and people. She was born in Sofia, Bulgaria, and immigrated to New Zealand in 1992, where she studied French, Russian, and English literature. In 2005, Kapka moved to Edinburgh, Scotland, and wrote her first book of narrative nonfiction, Street Without a Name. Her book, Border, A Journey to the Edge of Europe, was shortlisted for the 2020 Central European Prize in Literature. Her latest book, To the Lake, explores the human geography of two ancient lakes and unfolds to become a broader inquiry into how geopolitics imprints itself upon individuals and cultures. We'll now hear from Kapka Kassabova.
Hello, it is a pleasure to be broadcasting this tribute to Ismail Kadare from the Scottish Highlands, though it would have been a greater pleasure yet to be with you all in autumnal Oklahoma. Ismail Kadare has spoken of literature as an antidote to evil. I quote, "Faith in literature and in the creative process brings protection. It generates antibodies that allow you to struggle against state terror," unquote. So I want to start with an antidote of a word that is crucial in this era of mean politics and greedy exploitation of the earth's resources, when we are all experiencing loss. Generosity. It is the generosity of the Neustadt family that makes it possible for our borderless community of writers, readers, students and lovers of literature to celebrate great art and the people who make it. Generosity, of course, is at the heart of all creative work. To make a true work of art, you have to go for broke, give all you have, and expect nothing in return. I've been reading Ismail Kadare for over 20 years, since I was a university student. And I continue to read and reread his work today when our books are in a sort of background conversation, because that's the nature of literature. Once begun, the conversation doesn't need the author. Great literature goes beyond language, of course. Like music, it works in a kind of psychic osmosis. It crosses boundaries between the waking and the dreaming mind, between writer and reader, between continents and moments in time. This is why, when I opened my first Kadare book in the 1990s in New Zealand, it spoke to me instantly, even if it was written around the time of my birth, in a country I knew nothing about. That book was Broken April. Within a few pages, I knew that this book was talking to me from the highlands of Albania, but about myself, about the nature of family and clan loyalty, about freedom and why some reject it, about why humanity is periodically gripped by a ritual death wish, and about how Draculian regimes can sacrifice their young to keep themselves in power. Blood feudology is the term used in Broken April. Kronos devouring his children is a theme close to my own writer's heart, and it's one of the great themes in Kadare's fiction. And in our world today. In some way, that which many are facing today politically in their countries is where Kadare is coming from. The pitting of the individual against an infernal, faceless, sometimes faceless machine of power, the struggle to reclaim a voice in a cacophony of lies, this is his home turf. One of the things I love and admire the most in his work is how he turns a landscape into a state of mind and a state of mind into a place. The novel that's haunted me the most is The General of the Dead Army. It gave me lucid dreams. In the mountainous Albanian north, Italian soldiers from World War II are being exhumed from the frozen earth, and it's raining. That mindscape, with its furrows of collective memory, is ingrained in me. Kadare's Gothic Balkan landscapes are microcosms where a great Jungian principle comes into play. The psyche is the world. Another great pleasure of Kadare's fiction is his subversive humour. In his joyful early novel, Chronicle in Stone, when the foreign tanks roll into town and the air raid siren begins to wail, an old woman says, "Now we have a mourner who will wail for us all." In Broken April, the young protagonist, Georg, imagines how, once he is shot in a sacrificial vendetta, his wailers will scratch their faces and, quote, "From now on, the lives of all the generations to come in the two families would be an endless funeral feast, each side playing host in turn. And each side, before leaving for the feast, would don that blood-stained mask." Kadare is not a mourner. Although his narratives are set in conditions of an all-pervasive, self-cannibalizing tyranny, the guiding narrative consciousness at work is one that illuminates, subverts, and satirizes the very nature of tyranny. So in The Traitor's Niche, for example, the erasure of identity is carried out through the central archives, where, quote, "According to the old secret doctrine of call, it passed through five principal stages. First, the physical crushing of rebellion. Second, the extirpation of any idea of rebellion. Third, the destruction of culture, art, and tradition. Fourth, the eradication or impoverishment of language. And fifth, the extinction or enfeeblement of national memory." Unquote. The Traitor's Niche was written in 1978 in totalitarian Albania and allegorically set in the last dysfunctional century of Ottoman colonization in the Balkans. It remains, I think, one of his most haunting satires of absolute tyranny. At the same time, it's a great Balkan road trip of a novel. Many things were murky, Kadare has said, of life under totalitarianism, because two realities were closely intertwined, concrete reality and virtual reality. It was a kind of geographical or spiritual negative landscape. That's roughly how Osip Mandelstam imagined Dante's Inferno, as an indeterminate place, like the fringes of an epidemic. Unquote. Kadare's work illuminates just such negative landscapes. If you want a glimpse into the mind of a paranoid politician and his entourage, and those enslaved by him, read The Pyramid, where generations are harnessed by a pharaoh to build regime-aggrandizing structures. If you want to understand how a surveillance state works, at the deepest psychological level, read The Palace of Dreams, where your dreams are recorded and searched for either oracular or traitorous content. Having the wrong dream can kill you. Or read The Successor and its companion, Agamemnon's Daughter, to understand how mediocrity and evil are linked, how a tyranny ritually devours itself, but not before it feasts on the innocent. Both The Successor and Agamemnon's Daughter are masterworks of existential horror in the form of political thriller. If you want to understand the Balkans and Europe in the 20th century, read Chronicle in Stone, where a boy, not unlike the young Kadare himself, witnesses the fall of his city Gjirokasta to successive invaders. If you want to understand why East and West are forever fused in the Balkans, why Islam and Christianity are two faces of the same coin, then read 3 Elegies for Kosovo. Kadare has said, "When the truth is hidden or overridden, its place is soon taken by a kind of deceptive fog, which day by day, month by month, paralyzes everything. As the Greek tragedians said, every hidden crime gives birth to a new crime that resembles its predecessor." His novels are so cunningly inventive in form and so well traveled in this foggy realm of human experience that they remain perennially fresh. The master narrative of Kadare's work is Homeric in nature. It continues to uplift, transport, and cast the light of understanding. Kadare has traveled a long road, Dante-like, both protagonist and chronicler of the underworld. We are living in a time when the underworld is no longer just a mythical place. The underworld is rising to meet us. How shall we rise to the occasion? Kadare's work is a survival manual of the very highest order. There is really only one more thing to say, and I say it to Ismail Kadare on behalf of his readers around the world, both present and future, and that is simply Faleminderit. Thank you.
Kapka, if you are able to see this video at any point, thank you for that beautiful introduction to Kadare's work. You were exactly the person to do that. Thank you so much. And now, the moment that we've all been waiting for, we will watch Ismail Kadare receive the Neustadt International Prize for Literature at the U.S. Embassy in Tirana, Albania. When we realized that, owing to the pandemic, Mr. Kadare could not travel to Oklahoma to receive the Neustadt Prize, we asked the U.S. Embassy in Tirana to create a ceremony so that they could give the prize to Mr. Kadare on our behalf. I would like to thank Ambassador Yuri Kim and the staff of the U.S. Embassy in Tirana for creating a beautiful and elegant ceremony that you will see now. The recording of this ceremony was made just a couple of months ago in the lead up to this Lit Fest. Let's watch the prize ceremony with Ambassador Kim and Ismail Kadare.
Good evening. What a very special honor and privilege it is to be able to welcome you this evening to a ceremony to present the Neustadt International Prize for Literature to the great Ismail Kadare. The Neustadt Prize is one of the most important literary prizes in the world, and normally the winner would be invited to the University of Oklahoma for the presentation. This year, however, it is the prize rather than the winner that has traveled across an ocean to collect its true reward. As the American ambassador to Albania and a personal fan of Ismail Kadare, I am especially honored to be able to present America's Neustadt Award to one of the greatest Albanians in modern history. Born in 1936, Mr. Kadare has been celebrated around the world for his contributions as a poet and a novelist. In 2005, he was awarded the inaugural Man Booker International Prize. In 2009, he was presented with the Prince of Asturias Prize in Spain. And in 2015, he won the Jerusalem Prize for the freedom of the individual in society. In addition to being an artist, though, Ismail Kadare has been a stalwart champion of democracy and freedom here in Albania and around the world. Mr. Kadare once wrote, "I became familiar with literature before I knew freedom, so that it was literature that led me to liberty, not the other way around. Faith in literature and in the creative process brings protection. It generates antibodies that allow you to struggle against state terror." Mr. Kadare, your words ring true even today. Your words, your work have nurtured beauty, courage, and hope, not just for your fellow Albanians, but for so many around the world. On behalf of the World Literature Today organization, I am so very proud to present to Mr. Kadare the 2020 Neustadt International Prize for Literature, which comes with a prize of $50,000. Congratulations, Mr. Kadare. Thank you. Should we just a little bit?
Mirëmbrëma. Tashti ju prisit të them në një gjë të madhe këtu. Ne shkrimtarë e kemi këtë ankth përpara të folurës. Njerëzit kujtojnë se do themi gjëra të çuditshme kur në të vërtetë ne themi ndonjëherë gjëra shumë që duken shumë të zakonshme. Sepse gjërat e bukura të mëdha ndonjëherë janë shumë të thjeshta. Çfarë mund të them tjetër unë se gëzim është që këtu në një njerëz të pikave të ndryshme të globit më transmetojnë, më japin, më kapërcejnë nderimin që vjen nga gjithë bota. Çfarë do lloj fjalësh që të them, ato do të jenë të varfra, të dobta. Ne në një përkas shkrimtarëve të cilët dal nga dal po ikin nga kjo botë. Dhe do të kujtojnë shumë shpejt, nuk do të kujtojnë më si të gjallë, nuk do të thriten më. Por në këtë rast ne kemi për një detyrim të brendshëm moral të tregojmë atë që ka përjetuar letërsia në regjimet ku kemi jetuar. Letërsia ka qenë për letërsi mbeshin shumë mbledhje. Dhe juve mund të i përfitironi salla të mëdha me mijëra njerëz, të cilët pas i bënin disa brohoritje për shtetin dhe regjimin, ishin shumë të hidhur në shkrimtarin. Dhe ne ishim atje, ndiheshim si fajtor. Megjithse përpiqeshim të mos e tregonin këtë gjë. Dhe kur të shti, më bie rasti të jem përpara lexuesit shqiptar ose botror, kam një, nuk do të thosha brerje ndërgjegje, po një mundim, një vojtje të brendshme që mund të prek nderimin tuaj, nderimin e lexuesit botëror. Dhe të kem një breng për kolegët e mi që nuk e arritën kur këtë gjë. Dashuria e njerëzimit për letërsinë është një nga vlerat e qytetërimit njerëzor. Ne shkrimtarët e dim këtë gjë shumë mirë. Dhe ne kemi një mirënjohje të pafundme për lexuesin botëror kudo që ndodhet. Dhe më lejoni pra edhe një herë që nëpërmjet këtij tubimi të thjeshtë të më jepet mundësia që të kujtoj këtë bukuri të letërsisë, këtë mallëngjim të saj. Ajo e bën letër, e ka bërë njerëzimin më të bukur gjithmonë. Dhe njerëzimi e ka shpërblyer gjithmonë, do t'ja shpërblej gjithmonë. Ju falenderit edhe një herë.
All right, in addition to the impromptu remarks that Mr. Kadare gave after receiving the Neustadt Prize, he composed a formal talk that his eminent translator from Princeton University, David Bellos, will now read. Annie Kokobovo translated this talk, and you will be able to read it in the forthcoming issue of WLT in a special section devoted to Ismail Kadare. Let's hear the talk now by Mr. Kadare.
I'm happy and honored that the ceremony organized in honor of my being awarded the Neustadt Prize coincides with the 50th anniversary of the founding of the prize. There's no shortage of questions about literature. We hear questions such as, does the world need literature? The question reminds me of TV shows, questions that stir up debate, except that this question was raised already thousands of years ago. There have obviously been two parties battling over the question for and against literature. Literature was born along with a denial, a barrier. Even if at first this seems strange, if we think about the question, we will reach the conclusion that this negation is somehow appropriate to literature. It's even quite a natural question. Literature and negation are one and the same thing. Rather than being born of angels, literature is the handiwork of demons. Let's look at things more simply. Literature, in the form of early oral poetry, often had as its subject matter a return from a long journey. It told of what happened at a country's far border, in the desert, or in death. The first travelers coming back from afar were practically the first writers. Walking back to their countries, alone along a long road, their minds reconstructed events so as to make them more interesting to listeners. Thus, along the way, dialogues emerged, events became more exciting, colors grew brighter, and some things were emphasized and others erased. The travelers brought stories with them, but their heroes stayed mostly far away. They were absent, always in the beyond, either on the other side of state lines or on the other side of life, meaning dead. In this way, since its beginnings, death and absence assumed a special place in literature. But literature entered death's domain not to carry favor, but as an equal. In the majestic epic of Gilgamesh, literature, fully knowing the power of death, still assumed the right to censor it. Gilgamesh is defeated by death, but for the sake of literature, part of him still escaped the grip of death. To use contemporary terms, we might call this a contract. Only great art can engage in such a contract with the impossible. Literature continued to be nourished by death and its handmaidens, which are nighttime, sleep, dreams, and guilt. From its very beginnings, literature was bound up with sacrifice. Troy was the first victim on its altar. Subsequently, hundreds of events, topics, characters, and blood-drenched scenes enlarged the literary repertoire. When the Albanian poet Fan Nuri translated Victor Hugo's poem Waterloo, he noted at the end that after all the tragedy in the pages he translated, he had one consolation, namely that he himself was alive and that the poem had been reborn through his efforts. Literature was used to commanding this kind of sacrifice, and over the years we have paid this tribute in one way or another. Death, sleep, and guilt remind us of nighttime. Night has always been connected with negation in human thought. But we say such things in a light-hearted fashion without considering what terror there would be in this world if we were irrevocably separated from the night and lived in endless day. So far, no one has thought to do research on the role that night plays in softening humanity. Without its intervention, without the restraint and interruption that night brings, human evil, human anxiety and anger would march forward at a catastrophic pace. In its earliest era, literature knew only the dangers that threatened ordinary human life, namely erasure and oblivion. The rhapsodists sang, people heard them, and new rhapsodists emerged to sing songs, new songs that died away with their singers or shortly thereafter. In this sense, literature confronted some of the same natural dangers as a human life. But later on, literature faced dangers that came from a different sphere, from society and from the state. Probably because it gathered people in the center of cities, theater was the first literary form to provoke censorship. Official censorship was thus born over 2,500 years ago, and it was so powerful that it created many problems for the literary giants of that era, the great Greek tragedians. Censorship is bound up with writing. Before the Sumerians and Akkadians invented writing, efforts to control oral poetry were inexact and not very persistent. At the most extreme, a non-conforming rhapsodist would simply not be invited to sing at the gathering of the prince, and that was the end of that. But when writing appeared on the cultural horizon, it was like an unimaginable earthquake. Writing carried out a dual project. On one side, it opened a new horizon for literature, while on the other, it suffocated, killed, and mummified it. Prior to a new phase in its development, literature, in accordance with its stringent legal codes, always sought a heavy tribute from writers. They had to give up part of their spontaneity. They had to pass their thought through the cogs and wheels of the machinery of syntax. They could not criticize literature on any given day if they were in the mood to do so. Writing was thus a dual form of control. The control that derived from a kind of consciousness, prescient for its time, but also an official form of control. The history of writing is above all the history of the dangers confronting writers. Some contemporary expressions in Albanian are connected to this history. This literary work can burn you, we may say, or let's hope this work doesn't land on your head like a misfortune. They become surprisingly clear when we think about the clay tablets on which Sumerians recorded their thoughts. When the baked tablets were taken out of the oven without sufficient care, the writer could easily burn his hands. Or a literary work, let's say a long narrative, could have been stored in the writer's studio and cover an entire wall. And one day, either because it had been poorly set up, or because the tablets had not been baked properly, or because there was an earthquake, the tablets could collapse on the writer and trap him underneath. Like every new initiative, literature brought along many such dangers. These early possibilities were simple, though, compared to the notorious horrors that followed. Aeschylus leaving Athens was the first of many departures. Aeschylus and Homer were humanity's greatest writers until the 5th century BCE. At least one of these two great writers was obliged to abandon their home. I say at least one because we can't exclude the possibility that Homer, as a traveling rhapsodist, could have been traveling so much that for him the notion of leaving home would have had no meaning anyway. The departure or banishment of writers was thus tied to literature, becoming part of its genetic code from early on. But departure also changed over the centuries. Even as the weather in the world grew milder, its position vis-à-vis literature only grew harsher. Ovid leaving Rome seems like the most painful, because unlike the departure of Aeschylus, where it was the anger of writers that was decisive, Ovid was banished by the state. The repression of writers that continues to our time began with him. In Ovid's case, we see all the makings of future totalitarianism, condemnation with no known cause. The kind of suppression of the totalitarian state where you yourself don't even know why you're being sentenced. This terror of the unexplained, of blind fate, remained one of the key devices of terror until the 20th century, when communism, after having perfected its own devices, just like Kafka's machine, crumbled along with it. With their departures, great writers like Aeschylus and Dante Alighieri seem to have been looking for a way to return to that zone, that climate, and that chaos in which literature was born. In other words, they sought to experience another status in which they could achieve a semi-death, not to say death itself. It was perhaps an internal order of art, of the same great ritual that suggested to Dante that before he started describing his journey into the Inferno, he had to somehow separate himself from life. At the same time, it must be said that up until Dante, writers, even in misfortune, were generally treated as a lordly company. It was later dictatorships that understood that in order to attack writers better, they had to lower their status. So they made a habit of what had previously not been a habit, throwing writers into prison, putting them in common cells, interning them, dishonoring them, shunting them on trains from one camp to another, for insulting, re-educating them through physical labor, and so on and so forth. In no dictatorial regime has there been such a telepathic exchange between the tyrant and the people as under communism. Suffocating, irritating, terrifying, sleep-inducing, and intoxicating, the psychic echoes encompassed all this and ruled over everything. Communism took its battle against literature more seriously than any other regime. Communism and literature simply have no means of coexistence. The negative stance toward literature was not a late development of communism, it was inherent to it. The shallow paragraphs by Marx about classical literature or Shakespeare were just alibis to cover up later crimes. There is no room for literature in the Marxist vision of the future world. Lenin's seminal article, Party Organization and Party Literature, was as brutal in its effects as an outburst by Genghis Khan. There is a red thread among communists connecting their treatment of literature that reaches from Lenin's articles to Stalin's executions, to Mao's pathological hatred of writers, down to the massacres of writers and their readers in Cambodia's Pol Pot, by Cambodia's Pol Pot. Totalitarianism, likewise, surmised early on that it could not destroy literature through terror alone. It understood that a massacre alone would not do, that a suicide of sorts would also be needed to completely solve the problem of literature. Self-censorship, this long-standing, centuries-old disease which literature confronted but overcame, that was what communism tried to turn into a real plague. And it managed to do it one way or another. Thousands of mostly mediocre writers surrounded literature's temple on all sides. Their numbers grew daily, just as the number of true writers who sought to keep alive the holy fire decreased proportionately. Never has the literature of half the globe been confronted with such danger. In totalitarian regimes, literature and the arts were cruelly tested in a manner unknown in world history until that time. We know about the punishment of writers from before then. There were censors, prisons, and camps. But Stalinism went further. It did not satisfy itself with simply repressing great works, the ones that we call artistic cathedrals. it attempted to bury forever the possibility of their creation. In other words, that system sought to destroy the raw materials whereby such cathedrals are built. It attempted to create a new race of writers who would eagerly take upon themselves the destruction of literature. Stalinism achieved this, actually. Those of us who remained faithful to the temple were in the minority in that endless and hopeless desert known as socialist realism. Writers were thus broken into two groups, those who betrayed the temple and those who stayed faithful to it. The divine question that could be posed to writers of the East, what did you do, Adam, had two possible answers. The first answer was, I degraded myself and literature according to communist law. The second answer was, I continued to write normally as though communism didn't exist. When I hear questions like ones frequently put to writers of the former communist empire, questions like, how did you continue to write normally during a time and a place when this seemed impossible? My answer has been precisely this. We had faith in literature. It rewarded our faith and devotion with its blessing and protection. To believe in literature means to believe in a higher reality. To believe in literature means that your country's dark regime seems pale compared to the majestic literary funeral rites. To believe in this art means you always know that the government that dominates you, the police who spy on you, the parliament, bosses, administration, tyranny itself, are just a passing nightmare, mere dead matter compared to the great order of which you have become a member. I don't want to drag on, so let me just repeat something that I've said elsewhere in connection with an episode of Dante's Divine Comedy. While traveling through hell, Dante Alighieri is frightened for a moment by an approaching storm. But his master, Virgil, says, do not be afraid, it is a dead storm. In these words, we can find an explanation of what I just said. To view the storms of the regime as dead storms is an unusual skill. Only writing can afford a writer this skill. It's never been easy for a writer to feel alive amidst surrounding death. It has been said many times that to think normally in the mad world of communism is an unbelievable position. To speak normally would be outright heroic. Communism fell without fully realizing its perverse dream, and we've arrived at the end of the millennium without it. Our literature has lived in the world for 3,000 years. Its first millennium was wealthy and bright. The second one was unfortunately less rich. It seemed as though humanity wanted to rest a bit. And then the third millennium arrived, the one that we were living in, which gave new life to literature. Let us hope that this new millennium, the fourth one, will not repeat the second, as though in a fatal symmetry. During these difficult times when the whole planet is experiencing the distress of a global pandemic, I want to express my regret that I cannot be present among you for a beautiful celebration coinciding with the 50th anniversary of this prestigious prize. Because it's impossible for me to reach you from my native Albania on the Adriatic Sea, I wish to express my appreciation to the jury. I'm honored that you have chosen me from among the world's best known authors. And thank you to the fabulous poet, Kapka Kassabova, who nominated me for this prize. Thanks to Robert Con Davis-Undiano, Executive Director of World Literature Today, for his high consideration of my work. And thank you to the university, its students and faculty. Thank you to the talented translators of my work. And a special thank you and my gratitude to the respected Neustadt family for their engagement and generosity in the promotion of world literature.
Thank you so much, David Bellos, for that beautiful reading. It makes me wish that Ismail Kadare was actually here. Maybe we'll one day be able to bring him here. Please stay tuned for the closing session at which Kathy Neustadt, Daniel Simon, David Shook, and I will give some closing remarks and suggest some takeaways from this Lit Fest. If you're joining us, we'll see you in a moment. If you aren't, watch for news about the 2021 Neustadt Lit Fest in fall of 21. Stay safe and good night.
And as we make the transition, let me just give a couple of quick announcements. We know that some of you may have to leave us before we conclude this evening. Therefore, we would like to remind you now that your opinions and feedback about the Lit Fest are very important to us. So before you navigate away from the conference website, we ask that you take a few moments to complete the feedback survey for us. You'll see that in the menu bar at the top of your screen. Thank you. For this closing session, I want to again welcome R.C. Davis-Undiano, Executive Director of WLT and Neustadt Professor at the University of Oklahoma, as our moderator. R.C.?
Hello, everyone. Probably just spoke to some of you a few moments ago. You may have just watched, I hope you did, the award ceremony where Ismail Kadare received the Neustadt Prize. I'm happy to moderate this closing session along with three good friends. First is Kathy Neustadt, freelance writer, a freelance video producer for ABC News and one of the benefactors of the Neustadt Prize program. Also with me is Daniel Simon, editor-in-chief and assistant director of the World Literature Today organization. Also here is our good friend David Shook, internationally known translator, poet, and publisher. Okay, let me throw out just a few pertinent facts. This was our first 100% online Neustadt Lit Fest, and there were 700 registrations for this conference, far exceeding what we expected. There were over 3,000 individual session registrations, and this Lit Fest will be available on the Open Water site and on YouTube for about a year. So potentially hundreds of thousands of people could end up seeing the Neustadt Lit Fest. So my question to you three, are you surprised about this success with an online Lit Fest the first time out? Kathy, looks like you have a thought.
Well, my thought is that I think it's easier that this was 6 or 7 months after everything started going virtual. I think everybody has gotten the hang of it, but I think it was really pretty amazing that it opened up this prize because, you know, Oklahoma is not the easiest place to get to, especially for our international jurors and winners. And this just allowed family to be part of it and friends from around the world. And I think that it, like my sister Nancy said, I know that this is changing going forward, that hopefully we will be able to open it to people around the world while still being able to share in the intimacy of all being together at OU.
David, thoughts? David Shook?
I haven't been surprised, RC, but I have been really pleased with just how interactive the sessions have been, how much people have been commenting and asking questions in the chat feature, and really how seamlessly the technology has worked for the most part. It's been a great pleasure.
It seems like it's going to be cold and we're going to be distant, but in fact, there are moments where it's very intimate. I mean, everybody's right up to you. At a normal conference, as you're moving around from room to room, that doesn't happen. You don't sit right in front of the reader. So there is a kind of intimacy about it. Daniel, want to jump in?
Sure. I have to admit, I was really kind of a Zoom skeptic coming into this, and now I'm a Zoom convert. I must say, you know, using breakout rooms for the jury reading on Monday night is really fabulous. You know, having registrants from over 45 countries potentially attending the festival has been really remarkable. It's, for the first time, a truly global Lit Fest, which wouldn't have been possible in an in-person format. And so, as Kathy's saying, I think we'll hit our stride with the hybrid format coming, in years hence, and be able to do some version of an in-person festival along with a virtual one that will really reach, as you say, so many more people and be kind of the best of both worlds.
It does have the feeling of necessity being the mother of invention, maybe something we should have done around this time. It probably would have taken us longer, and we've leapt out there, and lo and behold, it works pretty well, and it's really great. What are some of the events this week, sessions that meant the most to you, that stood out for you, Kathy? Favorite.
Well, I think my favorite is the fact that the NSK jury got to read their works, which is the first time ever, because up to this year, well, let me just explain. The plan is that for the first time ever, we were going to bring all the jurors, NSK jurors, to OU like we do for the Neustadt jurors. And normally I think we've done a couple of video conferencing, and before that it was by phone. So being able to listen to all these accomplished writers of their own, be able to read their works, and like Daniel said, then go into breakout rooms was really wonderful. And of course the play today, which was done by the students, was so well done, and everybody put so much into it, and it was well received. So
it was a world premiere of Kadare's play. It was amazing.
So those are my highlights.
David?
I really enjoyed the panel on translation that I took part in. Of course, it was a great honor to be on a panel with the other David Bellos, who I've admired for a long time. I also had a really special morning. It's 2 hours later here in California than there, or earlier, I suppose. And I this morning was sitting with my 6-week-old listening to the premiere of that play. I think it's a good age to introduce a kid to Kadare. We're getting started early. But as I sat there listening to the play, I just thought what a special moment it was, and what a special opportunity the conferences being online has allowed us this year.
Daniel, you and Carrie White were the heavy lifters of this whole, I'll thank Carrie later, but the heavy lifters of this enterprise. What really stood out for you?
Well, just thinking about David holding his son who was 6 weeks old, and you're never too young to learn about Prometheus, I guess. So I think Kadare would heartily applaud that. And really, I think it's just been, with the book launch Monday night, Dispatches from the Republic of Letters, which David and Will Evans published. I think that'll be a great monument to the Neustadt tradition and just how visionary the Neustadt family was back in 1972, building off of the vision of Ivar Ivask to create this prize that was sort of an anti-Nobel at the outset, and has been, I think, aspirational for many years, but now is truly the global lit prize of that's really the jewel in the crown. It's not $1 million, but it's I think it has that prestige attached to it.
Well, then, and the Nobel, is, we all know, we don't need to go into it, has been a little bit tarnished over the last few years. And it's always seemed to me, if I can interject this, that the Neustadt Prize is not $2 million or $1.8 million the way the Nobel is. It's $50,000, which is considerable. But what really makes it special is the word of mouth that it is absolutely the prize of integrity. Jurors can be Neustadt jurors one time in their lives. And the jurors that have that experience go out there telling the rest of the world what an amazing process this is. And it is absolutely unmarked by any coercion or anything other than discussion of literary merit. I think that reputation has really carried the prize, don't you think?
I would agree. And just yesterday with the jury, we expected them to spend 2 hours together discussing their nominees and voting. and being done by noon, but they spent over 4 hours. It was like a master class in what makes literature great and why we benefit from great writers like Cynthia Leitich-Smith, our newest NSK laureate, our 10th laureate. So I think it was just a confirmation for me that the work that the juries do is such an affirmation of the power of literature and the quality of the literature itself to speak to readers across ages.
That is so well said. And of course, a very big event this year is that Cynthia Leitich-Smith is an Indigenous writer. So right at the point where the Neustadt Prize will basically open up to the world as a virtual prize, Indigenous communities nationally and internationally will want to participate in the Lit Fest that we do probably in September, October of fall of 2021. Daniel, are you sort of anticipating that we'll probably do a hybrid Lit Fest in the fall, find some way to have, if it is possible, some way to have people there in person, but have those same sessions out there on the internet?
I think it has to be. I mean, based on the experience we've had this year, it only makes sense to, when we're working on the curriculum packets for the school children, to be able to read Cynthia's work and explore it with their teachers, and then to make those packets available, not just to students in Norman, but all around the state with the State Department of Education, as well as, beyond with other states in the US. So I think it's really an opportunity for us to always be rethinking what it means to connect with readers and students. And so, yeah, I definitely think it will be a hybrid format from now on.
One of the, somebody earlier this evening talked about people involved in the literary enterprise go for broke, I think was the language that they used. And Kathy, I think about your family's commitment, your grandmother's vision and her support of the Neustadt Prize. And your dad was a close friend of mine. And I know you and your sisters very well. You all go for broke all the time. I mean, this is something you deeply care about. And when you get the chance, you live it. What drives that? Why is this something that people go for broke over, and you clearly go for broke?
Well, I'm going to speak for my sisters, but I think that they would agree, is we saw the enthusiasm with my father and my mom, and also my grandmother. This meant so much to them, and that they took such pleasure in being a part of it. More
Can I
than
interrupt?
just,
Mary,
yeah.
could you put up the pictures of her parents? Sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, thanks. Oh, there we are. So, but I think what happened for my dad in particular, and Nancy articulated it so beautifully, is it became more than just the prize. It became, how can we use this prize for the betterment of our students and their education? And actually with Zoom, I think we have a huge potential to be able to do that globally. But my dad, I know that the proceeds from the book that Daniel wrote of all the authors' speeches, all the winners' speeches, that part of it goes to the Walter and Dolores Neustadt Scholarship. But I don't know if you know that that was a gift that Nancy, Susan, and I gave to my dad on his 90th birthday. So what do you give somebody turning 90? For Dad, it meant the most to give a scholarship that will go to continuing to help the students. And that's always been where his heart was. He loved the prize. He loved the prestige of it and how it's grown thanks to people like you and Daniel. But it's all about the students for him. And Nancy repeated it twice, because that's how we felt. It was like, how can we use this platform to help everybody, including the students?
Thank you, Kathy. David, and I'm not trying to embarrass you and Kathy and Daniel, but I'll just say this plainly. David, you're a go for broke kind of guy as well. You care deeply about bringing international writers to the attention of readers in the U.S. You work on it day and night. What drives you so hard as a publisher, translator, poet to foster an international perspective in the U.S.? Why is that so important?
Thanks, RC. That's a really great question. And before I answer it, I'll say, for those who don't know, that my beliefs in the importance of this work are definitely grounded in my experience as an undergraduate at OU when I worked as an intern at the magazine. I've been thinking over the last couple days about something a friend of mine, the Mexican publisher Guillermo Quijas, once proposed, which was that the book is the best and most refined artifact of memory that mankind had ever created. That's a beautiful idea, but I think it can be expanded even further because, of course, RC books don't just recount our histories. They offer an entry point into the minds and lives of people both like us and utterly unlike us, in the past, in the present, and even in various imagined futures. The book, I believe, is our most enduring, most efficient human technology for building empathy, for deepening our understanding of the experience of another. And in today's world, I believe that mutual understanding is not just something that will make our culture more compassionate, more fully human, but I believe that in doing so, it's going to play a key role in our very survival as a species. That's why I think WLT, which in my opinion is definitely the most international literary magazine in the world, is so essential. That's why I think the Neustadt Prize and Festival matter. That's why I think what the Neustadt family has done is so inspiring. That's why I think everyone should order dispatches from the Republic of Letters. And that's really what's inspired me to go for broke and following in their footsteps as a translator, editor, and publisher of literature from around the world.
David, what I like about what you're saying is you're talking about the highest aspirations, but you're also talking about action steps, things that can be done to connect those aspirations to our actual lives. Daniel, let me bring you into the discussion. We're colleagues at the University of Oklahoma, but I'll just say it, you're one of the hardest working people I know that I've probably ever known. And your time is taken up with publishing international writers and your own poetry. Why is it so important to you and to the people around you, all of us, to do this?
Well, I mean, for me, it connects to, my grandfather, who was a school teacher in a one-room schoolhouse in Kansas. My aunt, who taught for 50 years in schools, and to my brother, who was an aspiring poet, but he loved Yeats, and so many personal connections for me help remind me that it's it's a multi-generational effort to take great literature, inspire ourselves and those around us, with these kind of personal connections that we make with our families, our students, our friends and colleagues, and really it's, I think, an opportunity to kind of carry on a tradition. WLT is almost 100 years old, and just being appreciative of that legacy, and that it really belongs to the people of Oklahoma, and we're just the stewards for a little while, making that tradition even a little bit better, as much as we can.
Well, I'm going to say it is absolutely humbling to be around folks like you and to work with you on the kinds of projects that we do. But the amazing thing about the Lit Fest is there were a lot of folks like us this week, and their commitment and their belief in what they do, their amazing talent and energy. I think I will never forget. And if folks hear me say this now, they should absolutely go to the open water site and watch the session where the jurors read from their own work and talk about their work. I've never seen anything quite like it. It was so intimate and powerful and heartfelt, and the things that they showed and things they read were so amazing. And David, your contributions this week, and Kathy's, and Susan's, and Nancy's, and so many others, people who just deeply care about what they do. And you can't be casual about this. It is just an amazing experience to be in this very rich atmosphere. And I'm partly I want to motivate people to do two things. If there's sessions you missed this week, go back and watch them. They're just amazing. And also put it on your calendar that you want to be there for the 2021 Neustadt Lit Fest, where we'll honor Cynthia Leidig Smith. It's just going to be an amazing experience. It's getting late in the evening. There's some other people I would really like to thank. Thank you, staff at WLT, Daniel, of course, you, Michelle Johnson, Robert Volmar, Terry Stubblefield, Kay Blunk, Jen Blair. She's I was going to say no longer with us. That sounds ominous. She's in another job in Texas, and our new staff member, Gail Curry. We're so proud to have her. Ours is a hardworking office, and everyone at WLT does so much to make the magazine and its many programs a success. The challenge of going 100% online with the 2020 Neustadt Lit Fest was a particular challenge, and let there be no confusion about this. We could not have done it, would not have done it without the guidance of Dr. Carrie White. And I hope this makes her blush, because she should absolutely understand that we owe her so much. She was our conference host and coordinator. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, President Joe Harroz. We're so lucky to have a visionary leader like President Harroz. Thank you for your support of the Lit Fest. Thank you, Richard Feinberg, Laurie Smith, Adrian Creso, for helping in a variety of ways. On the Neustadt Lit Fest site, please check the list of our sponsors and partners. Fortunately, the list is so long, I'm not going to read it here, but they're just amazing. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of the Neustadt Lit Fest. Good night, Dottie Neustadt. We can see you out there. You think we can't, but we can. Good night, everyone. And I'm going to allow Dr. Carrie White to wrap it up.
Just one final word. Thank you all from wherever you're joining us, and wherever life takes you. Thank you. Have a great night.